Mr. Jawan, thanks so much for joining us. Pratham has made such a mark because I think it's made a difference in the way we look at education for children, for the underprivileged, and you've done some great work around it. It's a movement that has grown with a lot of like-minded people coming and joining you. But I'm going to ask you, in the whole journey, when we look back, it looks like a big success. But what were the important turning points for you yourself in creating Pratham?
So before creating Pratham, there were a couple of other turning points. I was a teacher at the Bombay University Department of Chemical Technology. And then Mr. Anil Bordia, the then Education Secretary, Government of India, dragged me into the National Literacy Mission. One midnight, he challenged me that I was just...
And you were part of a striking group of teachers. So that was the genesis. That's the exciting part which you should not miss.
That's how I met Mr. Bordia. And so he challenged me saying, you do all these things, but you want social justice, and the people you're writing for and printing posters for can't even read them, 65% of them. So what are you going to do about that? So that was a turning point in which I felt that working towards literacy, adult literacy, was an important thing. And then that just took up my life entirely. And then over a period of time, that adult literacy movement, because of various things that were happening in the country as well, did not keep its promise. Rajiv Gandhi was out of power. There was no money. India was going into economic liberalization and so on and so forth. So we were looking at other things that we were doing. And that's when Pratham, the organization, came about. The main thing about Pratham, or Pratham was not the name at that time. It was called Bombay Education Initiative. And UNICEF initiated this thought, which I liked very much. I had gone to the National Literacy Mission because it talked about governments can't make people literate, people have to make themselves literate. It had a sense of people's movement. That's what attracted me in the first place to that. So the idea of what UNICEF called the Bombay Education Initiative was similar. What it said was you bring government, business and people or civil society together to own problems of education and solve them and create resources for them. And I thought that was another movement, and that there was some thought that could actually change the way we think about solving educational problems. That was another beginning, different, but a beginning nonetheless, in which we brought people from different walks of life together to form a trust. Mr. Sharad Kale, later on he retired as the Additional Chief Secretary of Maharashtra. He was the Municipal Commissioner. Mrs. Kumud Bansal, late Mrs. Bansal, who was the later on Education Secretary, Government of India, she was there. Mr. S.P. Godrej was there. Richard Bridle, UNICEF. So a lot of top people, so to say, of Mumbai administration and so on were all there. And the trust was created with the idea that we could create a what they called societal mission, which was an exciting idea. So that was another turning point that I actually started working on that. The big one was because nobody believed that Pratham could actually become a movement. The question was, NGOs are not supposed to do work on scale. There were other people who were saying, if you are going to work with municipal schools, it's not going to work out. I mean, it's going to be a waste of time and money. And we kept challenging these people that if we don't work with the government schools, then how do you expect education to get better if we only start, work in private and so on? So the first one was, the big moment was when I remember nobody was giving us money, and Mr. Palia was the secretary of the Bombay Community Public Charitable Trust, set up by Mr. H.T. Parikh at that time. And the idea of that trust also was to solve problems of Mumbai. And so I went to Mr. Palia about this model and said, I want to start these preschool centers through this platform. And we need, at this moment, we want to start 400. I said, you're crazy. People spend a lifetime starting 25, and you're saying 400, what are you talking about? And I said, I only need 2,000 rupees per preschool center. He said, this is even crazier. This doesn't work. So I said, well, let's try. So we actually decided we are going to have a bet. That if I could start 100 preschool centers in the next 3 months, then he would give me 4 lakh rupees to start. And we went out And actually, my team of young people, mostly slum dwellers, actually did it. And so we got our first 4 lakh rupees from the BCPT, as it's called. Now, that you can actually show that you can go to scale on a large scale was a good idea. There was a lot of battle at that time. Some people said these are crash programs, they will crash. There were others who liked what we were doing, saying that look, India has problems always in the millions and hundreds of millions. We are not talking about ones and twos. So little models and dainty boutique models are not going to work. If you want to go the whole hog, and there may be failures, but you have to go try on a very massive scale. And the big turning point came when Mr. Vagul, the then chairman of ICICI, actually said, I support this, and became the chairman of Pratham. And with him, I think we just never looked back afterwards. Because essentially, we knew how to mobilize people, but we had no access to money. With Mr. Vagul in our corner, or actually leading the charge, we stopped worrying about the money. Not that we were getting billions and billions, but what was necessary, he said, don't worry, we'll mobilize the money. And he started getting leaders of business and industry also on this side. Not always supporting Pratham, but the viewpoint. And then you find towards the end of the decade, 90s, you see many people getting into education. Now, Mr. Premji set up his foundation in 2002 or 3 and completely on education.
What stands out for me in Pratham is as you rightly pointed out, NGOs normally don't look at scale. You started off looking at scale. You always wanted to. I mean, from your ambitions, you always wanted. You didn't think of a small boutique piece. The second is partnership. The fact that you took multiple stakeholders together, and the third is innovation. Because I think there's a freshness of ideas that Pratham brings on the table, and the innovative programs it brings on, which have always been refreshed in the sense. This is not the same cachet of programs that you started out with. So, what is the genesis of this, and how has this particular mindset helped you?
First of all, I can't take credit for all those things, although it makes me feel very nice. See, National Literacy Mission was about making the whole country literate. And that vision of a literate India came from the likes of Rajiv Gandhi, Sam Pitroda, Anil Bordia, and so on, who were at the top of the society and felt that this can be done and should be done, giving out that kind of a message, which inspired young people like me sitting in one corner of Mumbai. It was an inspiring message. That is something that is important. You have to create that environment in which people feel inspired. The second piece is that it was always this mission, and what UNICEF was talking about, the societal mission, was not about 10 and 15 and 100 people. They were saying, in at least Pratham case, where the Bombay Education Initiative was started, it was about solve the problems of Mumbai, nothing less. So you already had the scale in mind. Now the question was, on scale, if you want to solve problems, how are you going to do it? And clearly, you can't go with the regular methods. In fact, we went through the usual way in the initial days of Pratham. Somebody said teacher training, and we said, yeah, teacher training. And the funny thing is, we went for teacher training, and the teachers started sending feedback. We used to, like all social work practice, we used to get evaluation of the teacher training program. And we started getting notes from the teachers saying, Hindi, it was, you think you know too much, but watch out what you are up against. This is not easy. You have to deal with us. And it was almost threatening. And I think in a sense they were right. I mean, what do you know about teaching kids from slums? You are all university teachers and fancy social workers. What do you know about teaching? We have to deal with the realities. They were not mistaken. So you can't do the usual stuff. Got to break free of what is, if you, like many people have said, if you keep on doing the same thing that you've been doing all these years, you're not likely to solve the problem. That is easy. So you have to try something different. And if you want to know the genesis of this kind of innovativeness, very simple. If there's no money, there's no space, there's no trained people, but a goal, what do you have? You have to innovate. So then you say, let's pretend that space is not required. If you want to start preschool centers in the slums of Mumbai, there's no space. What do? Well, work in the space you have. If you don't have trained people, what do? Well, work with the people you have. And in this, I often quote Lao Tzu's poem: go to the people, love them, live with them, learn from them, start with what they know, build on what they have, and when it is done, they will say we did it ourselves. That I hold very dear to my own heart, because that's the whole crux of things. It's not about me waving the flag and saying, follow me, I am the leader. It's not. It's about creating opportunities for large numbers of people to feel that I can do it too. And how will you do that?
And it's worked, because I don't have the latest figures, but I'm just going through it. What, you're in 21 states, working with 200,000 people on the ground at about 262,000 villages. I'm not too sure how right these numbers are. These are the last published numbers. But I'm saying that this idea, the fact that you could take it outside Mumbai where it germinated, in many senses it was a solution to a very specific Mumbai problem, which was urban slums. How did you take it and make it work across?
No. So we had no idea, and we had no intentions of going outside of Mumbai. Mr. Vagul is the one to be blamed, because he kept talking to people in business and industry and so on. And so the first ones were in Bangalore, including Rohini, Nilekani and others, who said, if you can do it in Bombay, why can't we do it in Bangalore? And they said, go ahead. Then somebody else, retired IFS, Foreign Service and ex-ambassador in Delhi, Mr. Vinod Khanna, said, why can't I do it in Delhi? We said, please go ahead. Somebody in Jaipur said,
it became a big cooperation.
So more people and autonomous functioning bodies, they were all registered as independent trusts as Pratham. And we said, you be responsible for what you're doing. And more people felt that they could do it themselves. So that this sort of leadership started emerging in different cities. Some stayed, some continued, some flourished, some did not. But the point is that the spread was spontaneous replication of what we were trying to do. So we did not intentionally go and do it. But once that scale started moving, then one thing led to another. Then Mr. M.K. Kaur, who was the Education Secretary in 98-99, he decided that this model is good, and he brought a whole bunch of IAS officers to Mumbai to say, why don't you try this? He was Education Secretary. And then Lucknow happened, and then Jaipur happened, and the government started saying, why don't you try it here? So we just didn't have control over how it was growing. It was not as though we decided now we're going to have a branch here and then we are going to do this. It just started happening. So we can't be blamed for growing big. But once we were riding this tiger, or at least we had the choice of being eaten up or riding, we decided to ride the tiger. It had its own problems. And then we could start seeing what is that we need to work on. So we were never afraid. The whole team of Pratham, even today, if you say, let's go, and we are doing it now, we're going to do it in October to December period, go to 100,000 villages to do something. Nobody says, yeah, this piece of cake can be done.
Okay. I want to ask you two questions on this. One's image, and because of a lot of the public impression, is that government projects are always stodgy. The moment you have a big national mission, and now you've got a lot of new vigor on national missions, and we won't talk about that. But the moment you have the government machinery, it is bureaucratic, red tape. They're very difficult to, they are very reluctant to embrace change. Your experience seems to suggest that the government and the bureaucracy embraced change and were partners with you. So is that a bit of a myth?
I think it's government. I look at the government like a sleeping elephant. And you poke it and poke it and poke it and poke it, and it doesn't move, and suddenly it starts running. Then it destroys everything in the way, and it goes mad. I think there are circumstances under which government machineries work very well. We've seen this. I remember we started the Read India program in 2004-05 in Madhya Pradesh. And there was a remarkable state project director there who was all over the state encouraging teachers, talking to them and saying, we must do this and all that. And we saw a huge set of inspired people. And it worked. Many people worked. Even in Maharashtra, last year we saw that people were doing this. Not last year, many times over, when the machinery is led by inspired people with a reasonable understanding and agenda and a goal, the machinery responds. It's not. It's not that they can't embrace change. In fact, many of the big innovations actually come inside the government. We just keep on talking about innovation. Let's say Nandan Nilekani came up with UID, but look at how it was embraced by the whole system. Of course, there were quarrels and squabbles, but that was an innovation inside the government. When Mr. Nitish Kumar started distributing bicycles in Bihar, who started that? No NGO did that. NGO couldn't even think of such a thing. So let's not just say governments are all stupid. It's not true. But what is required, as in any organization, is a plan and a leadership which everybody can actually be. I mean, people are willing to be led. People see a sense in what you're doing. If you do things that don't make sense to people, then nobody's going to follow you. And why they don't make sense to you is some leaders say, karna hai to karo, hona hai to hoga. Doesn't work. You make big slogans and don't provide money. People know you are not really serious about it. So it doesn't work. Look at Manrega, whatever you may say. Such a huge program. Who started it? Government started it.
Sure. What are your learnings when you, from your experience in setting up, driving and scaling up a social program or a social agenda that Pratham has? Because, you're up against a lot of odds, and that's the other thing I find fascinating, because in an organization that wants to make a big vision statement and implement it, they have structures, they have processes, they have incentives, they have money to throw at it. In a social organization, what you're essentially doing is inspiring people or kindling their passion to do something. So what are the learnings from driving a big social program like this?
I don't know. What helped me work, if it can be generalized at all, it is to say that it's a combination of factors. First of all, what you think is to be done or should be done, a lot of people should be able to accept that that is the problem and that is one problem that they want to solve if they can buy your solution. So, a lot of people should be able to identify with what you're saying. That is an important part. What that means to me also is if you put too much of a fine print, not a lot of people will come. That's why we say every child in school and learning well. When we said that in 94, 95, without a great deal of thought, most people seem to say, yeah, that's a good idea and it makes sense, and people started joining. And that was a good time for India, because even people like Vagul, others, sense that India is going to go through a growth path in which education is going to become critical. So a lot of people bought into it, not only from the slums, because the people in the slums knew that their children had to be educated. It was not that they were apathetic to it. So anyway, same with higher levels of the society, and everybody was on that, and you could see. So what you are saying is not something that you are saying. Just because you scream and create a marketing strategy, it doesn't mean everybody is going to join you. That's what I think. The second piece is whether your solutions are demonstrated. Can you convince people? And that is a very slippery area, because some people can be convinced. Now, everybody like you will talk about Asar that Pratham does, and that's one thing that you remember, but nobody seems to know that we are actually working on Read India, and we have proven with randomized controlled trials, platinum standard, that say that a child not reading or children not reading in large communities, you can change the whole scenario in less than 50 days. And children can learn to read, write and do basic arithmetic. Now that's a big solution to a crisis, and we're not talking about taking years, we're saying within a number of days it can be done. That people are not willing to catch, because policy and analysis is all sexy, right? The solution is not, because that's where you have to sweat it out. So we don't want. But on the ground, people say, "Arey, aap logon ne ye kiya. And 5 years my child has been going to school, but now you actually turned it around in 2 months, 3 months. How did you do that?" So I think there is a misalignment sometimes if you're not looking at the solution. If the solution starts working, then it has its own momentum, and then people start moving. This is what happened when we launched Read India. Many people started liking it until there was some distraction provided by some other people. So I think you have to be, that's why people say you are the right person, right idea at the right time. So is that so? And how broad is it? And how many people will actually embrace such an idea without second thoughts? Because many NGOs have, fine print. If you agree with this and we feel this, we feel that, that's too much. And Pratham's genesis says that we are a broad alignment. No, and nobody has a political view about education. And seriously, because there's so many industrial people supporting, there are so many people on the ground supporting, how can you come to a political understanding? There's no political understanding of education, or at least not to Pratham. So we don't make statements about it, but we say all children learning well. What does that mean? You define the learning. Let the government define the learning, and according to that, let's go. But today the situation is really bad. So I think to drive it, you must create conditions, you must create platforms, and people must get opportunities to participate. It's not just about employing people. From old times, almost since 95, one of our first volunteers is now working with the Omidyar network, and he set up the Parliamentary Research Services, an innovation in itself. C.V. Madhukar, he was working very close by in ICICI Securities. Even before Mr. Vagul came, and he came and said, I want to volunteer. And then we started seeing many young people, qualified professionals, joining in and saying, I want to be a part of Pratham. He said, be my guest, start working. It doesn't matter what your background is. So if you can create the opportunity, then people want to be a part of it. And then if there are many barriers in, oh, you must be this and you must do that, and then, no. Here, what I've always believed in is somebody comes and says, I want to work. And say, go ahead, start work, we'll see what to do.
Okay. My next question is, you did a PhD in chemistry, you were a chemistry professor. For a chemistry professor to lead one of the biggest movements like Pratham, what was the learning that you went through? Or how did you have to relearn and unlearn and open your mind?
What you don't know is before I became a chemistry professor, I was a protester, I was a student organizer, I was, and also...
And your father too, he set up the
it starts with my father, but that's one part, But the second part, which you don't know, is I was ahead in dramatics, I was singing, I used to have a ball in college, never attended lectures. So I was good at organizing, I was good at social things to do. So I had all those skill sets, and I use them now. I've written songs. One song that I wrote became Maharashtra's theme song for girl child's education. And you won't know that. But that was 1998, and to my embarrassment, it was painted on every school wall. And kids used to sing. Anyway, so I have done many things. I had other experiences. But I think what you are asking me is what does chemistry have to do with it?
No, also it's a mind shift change, right?
It's not. I mean, you are. If I was a complete laboratory person, I wouldn't have been able to do it. So my personality was not just the laboratory thing. I was much better at outside the classroom, outside the school, and that. So all that has come to use. But the chemistry discipline and the learning from chemistry helped. The concept of catalysis, people don't understand. And I can claim that I do understand a bit of it. And how to catalyze social reactions. At least, well, I can claim that I've used some of that knowledge. Chemistry of people is important. How do you deal with this? So there is a lot that you can take from chemistry into people, because it's always about large numbers of people as well. So large numbers of molecules, large numbers of people.
So this is a parallel nobody would have drawn.
I'll give you a lesson in chemistry of people.
I would love that. But in this whole journey, it's nice to look back and look at successes, Mr. Jawan. But have there been missteps, which took you back, which made you learn? Because a lot of learning comes from missteps.
If you go back and start looking at historically what we should have done, what we should not have done, what could have been different, you can always second guess and go back in history and all that. But I think our growth earlier on was very rapid. Like I said, we were just riding a tiger and we couldn't have chained it. But one probably thing that we could have avoided is going nationwide in 2005, 2006. The Asar survey was fine. But I think we could have tried something else before, maybe. And we thought about it. We knew that there were two options. One was to create, large scale but controlled models, and the other was to go whole hog and spread around the country. In the summer of 2008, we know that we had at least one volunteer in 370,000 villages of India. But what does that mean? Now Where are they? And what did you do? But we went and touched so many people in India and knew that we can do that. And we knew that those people wanted to change, but we could not go beyond that. We could not capitalize on it and create a bigger movement for a variety of reasons. And now we are always, every time you make a move, you're probably making a mistake. And then in hindsight, you will say, I shouldn't have done that way. But we were never in two minds about doing things. Once we decided, we went after it. And that was the good thing. And our supporters, our board members, see, I've been very lucky with the support that I've got. And starting with, as I said, I can't tire of saying that, Mr. Vagul, and others who joined the board have been very supportive, not micromanaging, questioning, but not challenging, or maybe challenging but not questioning. So,
But has there ever been a point where you questioned what you're doing, an existential crisis where you said, am I doing the right thing? Is this something which is, and I'm sure in the early stages you would have thought that maybe I've taken on too much. Or
to the contrary, early stages there was no time to think, and I did not think. Because there was a point to prove that you can work on scale, and had to go out and show, and I was much younger. So there was that feeling. I don't think that was there in the early days. But of late, especially past 5, 6, 7 years, I've been wondering whether some of the assumptions that we've worked with, are they true or not? And some of these things are, so for example, for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, who knows, we felt that government will provide good education and should provide education. Maybe it will not happen. Maybe in the new era, maybe this system, education is completely broken. So I keep saying some things half seriously, and some of my colleagues try to shut me up, but let me say it on camera. So our tagline has been every child in school and learning well. And I started asking a few years ago my colleagues whether we should change it to every child not in school and learning well. Because the school may be so broken, and I'm not talking about school as just a building. It starts from the concept of curriculum, the way it is taught, there's an institution called teachers, the whole system, and what it tries to do and what it is meant for. We think it is meant for something, but the end result is something else. And the world is changing so dramatically that a linear process of learning that is forced upon the population is completely outdated. And maybe we are here now in an era of the internet, which is completely non-linear and random access. So if that is the case, how is this model valid? And why is there not another model that will become valid? Maybe another 100 years it will not be valid, who knows? So those are things that you start asking.
that brings me to this whole issue of digital. It's provided a platform and an access point which is unbelievable, in its scope and its scale. You look at a Khan Academy, for instance, what it has done with tutorials globally. Do you think a novel, new format, new way of access can be created through online, especially in the area that you're working in?
I think it is happening, and it is going to happen. But the Khan Academy or anything else, the MOOCs are not the final answer. That is just the starting solutions. Because we are all still under the influence of the system from which we have grown. And our existence is limited by this legacy. For example, in India, whatever digital education is used, there is a textbook, and all these companies have created textbooks on digital media. All right? But if you look at it completely differently, if I start giving children a new experience in the idea of gravity, let's say, through audio visuals, okay, and then write a book that helps understanding that, then that would be a complete change. Today, textbook comes first and everything else comes after. But suppose if I say no textbook, but let me talk, the idea of gravitation has to be understood. And then you'll hear big scientists saying, I really don't have a clue what gravitation is. And when you say that, the child is going to say, huh? What do you mean you don't know what gravitation is and why it works? But that's what great scientists would say. I really don't know. I mean, I have an idea. I think it works because of this. And then we suddenly tell people, and and then the exploration of the beautiful idea of what it is, then the textbook comes. And the textbook is a completely different thing then.
So it's really changing the concept of how we look at education on its head, really, and open it up and make it more democratic.
It's sideways, God knows. We underestimate what a paradigm shift we are undergoing. You see, we just don't figure it. People, we're just too, in the villages, what the cell phone is going to do to the kids is beyond imagination. And it may not lead to the kind of education we want.
And so it's important that we look at what is going
What is life? How is life changing? We are too caught up in what we think. And even the young people, unfortunately, are getting caught up in these models. But anyway.
Shifting track a little, what has also happened interestingly is that youngsters want to do something. They open their mind to the possibilities of doing three things which they always did: engineering, medical, or government service, or something else. They suddenly opportunity has allowed choices. Many kids want to join, or young professionals want to join the social sector, for instance. My question to you is that what should they do? What should they keep in mind if they want to make an entry into the social sector and have a great career over there? What are the things that they should keep in mind, and how do they skill themselves for something?
I'm not qualified to answer this question.
You spent a lifetime in it.
No, I don't know. Because I didn't do it because somebody told me or I chose. I just jumped.
And you made your way. But for others who want to come in,
I don't know. I'll tell you what happens. It started old times. I'll tell you the stories. Then maybe some of you can draw conclusions. So people used to walk into our office when I was working on this adult literacy theme in the slums. It was a really small shack. It's still there, except that I don't sit there. People would walk in and say, I want to work for this organization, which was called Coro. It still exists. And I'd say, why? And they say, because I want to do social work. I said, we don't do social work, you can leave. And they'd say, but I want to do social work. And I had to explain to them that everything people do is social, and hence all work is social. So this is not social work. Don't come here because you think, oh my God, I'm sacrificing so much. So especially in Pratham, when people come and tell me that I'm giving up a corporate job and come, look, you don't do me a favor. You want to come here, work, period. You're coming here with a frame of reference. This is business. You've got to work, show productivity, and don't tell me you've given up something. So first of all, get off the high horse. You want to do work, roll up your sleeves, do the work. That is the first thing. So, I could have become an engineer. Go tell your parents. Don't tell me that. Okay? So that is the first thing. This is all humbug. Okay, if you want to spend 2 years and then go off to business school, that's fine. That I can understand. You can do that. Yes, the 2 years, do hard work and then go to whatever business school you want and then make your millions. No problem. I have nothing but contribute for 2 years with all your heart and brain and completely. So that is something that is extremely important to know. Don't do anybody a favor if you're coming into the social sector. Come because there's so much more that you can get than you can give. Sure. Don't come, this whole thing, language about giving back to the society is all bullshit. Okay, you don't give back to anybody anything. You get much more than you could have ever imagined by working on a completely different problem. It need not be in the slums or villages. It could be just growing a plant. Do something different so that you can learn something new. You discover something about yourself. I don't have the patience to help a plant grow. I'm not a gardener. For God's sake, become a gardener. It'll teach you something. For God's sake, go look after some kid and see what a mother has to go through sitting with a kid 24 hours a day. All that is an experience. So this thing about wanting to go in social sector... No, but I think
that's where the change is. They want to really actually work...
One more word. A career is something that I've never understood. You want to make a career in politics, some people say. I want to make a career in... I don't understand that language. I want to work and I want to keep on working. Whether that is career or not, I don't know. So I think I'm old-fashioned maybe. Maybe this is new fashion, social sector career. I don't identify.
They feel that they want to work in the social sector.
Come work.
What should they be killing themselves for? Or how can they equip themselves for it? Or, is it...
I think there's so many things to do in the social sector. Like I said, Madhukar was already US trained and ISEC and, brilliant, whatever. And he went through a lot of things and he ended up doing completely, he had his travel, went to Kennedy School and all that. There are others who did that. So you will find your path once you are in the sector because this is a completely new area. If you think, and most of the people who come to this sector don't come necessarily because they have some skills that they will apply here. That is a wrong choice. Yeah, sometimes it is so. You may be a computer programmer and you may actually start writing songs for children. Who knows? Discover something that's inside you. But the organization may say, write the songs, but make sure my software is done, which is fine.
Mr. Ivan, every sector complains about a talent gap or a talent shortage. In your case, you're expanding, you're innovating, you're growing. Do you also face the same challenges?
Actually, this is one sector in which all kinds of talent is required. This has been a neglected sector. Usually highly educated and all those people did not get into this sector. It was meant for social workers and then they went on to do something or the other. And I don't mean career social workers, people trained as social workers. There were some professionals coming in. But in this, for example, when we started doing ASAR, and Governor Rajan said yesterday we need more economists, the whole idea of analyzing a situation, this is where I'm glad I'm a chemist, or at least a science student. People don't tend to understand the difference between fact and fiction. And social sector is where, my emotions and what I feel. That's not true. That's not right. If you're going to look at... So when people say, ASAR says 95% children in school, how is that possible? We ask a simple question, are you enrolled in school? Aapka naam dakhil kiya hai school mein? And they say, that is what we are saying. We are not saying they go to school every day. Don't misinterpret what we are saying. But don't forget that 95-96% of all 6 to 14-year-olds are saying my name is written in the school, which means that there is a school nearby. And they are saying my name is written. If they don't go, that's a completely different... So looking at problems, understanding the reality is not something that comes because I feel. And then understanding information, understanding evidence, none of these skill sets are widely available in the social sector. Our experiments, what is our evaluation? We are all weak in all this. Maybe all India is weak, really. I can't see that the business sector is really well ahead in this. Maybe finance is, but even there's a problem. We are very weak in everything. Social sector is definitely deprived.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Social sector was seen more something out of the heart rather than something out of the head in that context. There was very little left brain used to look at, focus, strategy, scale, scientific analysis, etc. And I think you brought a lot of that. Is that what is required to get, and when you talk about Azam Premji or the foundation, they are using corporate principles and putting it in, it might be the wrong choice of words, but they're really using the learnings from structured processes into the social sector. Do you think that's a positive change that's happening?
I think, first of all these people from different walks of life, from the higher levels of the society, are engaging in social issues and all that is a big, big plus. What they are doing is going to help or hurt is another matter altogether. I think people need to be engaged. Once you're engaged with a problem, and many people are engaged with different problems, you end up finding different solutions and something will stick. I don't think any one of us can actually say that I have the solution. That's what evolution is all about. We'll find the solution as we go along and something will click. Yes, it is a useful thing. This brain and heart wala, from early days I keep telling my colleagues that people have it all worked out wrong. What you need is the fire here and ice here. People tend to have his ice here and fire here or here. So you got to change that.
That's well put. See, all of us have to unlearn, huh?
No, it's our tendency. This is not always true. Sometimes you need to have fire here as well. You got to blow your top.
We spoke about digital and the online medium. It's changing the way, pretty much every business is working, Ms. Chavan. How has it changed your sector? For example, when you do Asar, it's a huge data exercise. How has this whole data mining, the digital space, changed the way you are looking at the next phase of scale and growth?
What Asar did, and unfortunately we brought out 10 Asar reports, 10 surveys nationwide, and they were not dependent on digital communication at all. We were doing the whole Belgadi way. The only thing was we were entering data onto computers and transferring data, and then nobody really went seriously into data mining. We were looking for people to do data mining, but there were none. Some economists tried and looked, but maybe not. Maybe we don't have enough data. So, but the data itself, looking at numbers, was very interesting. And then you start engaging with the real numbers and say, what is going on? I'll give you an example. Once upon a time, when we first started the survey, our survey sample would be something like 700,000 kids. And then 10th survey, 9th survey, we said we're doing the same number of villages, same number of households, and the number of children we can access is only about 500,000 or 550,000, I forget now. Why is this number dropping? And there was no good reason why that was happening. And then we found the answer. The number of rural households in India has gone up by 30%. Now you will figure out then you have to figure out why it should have happened. So the reality of India changing before your eyes through this survey, you can start seeing how many villages are going empty, how many homes are going empty, what is changing. India keeps changing before your eyes, and then you start seeing number. For example, the fact that we were monitoring children going to private schools. When we started out, in Uttar Pradesh, some 20% children were going to private schools. Today it is 48%. It happened in front of our eyes, and mostly after 2008-9. The question is, why did that happen? And I'm trying to figure it out. Now, there are connections to be made. Now, recently I read that about 1 million people from Uttar Pradesh migrated to Gulf states. Could that have had an influence in the last 6-7 years? The repatriated money, would that create this kind of a private school movement? Because Bihar did not change. But then, so there are so many different questions. More information and data you have, the more food for thought. If you don't have this information, don't have real data, then there is a lot of dreaming and imagination.
So you see data and digital playing a far bigger role going ahead?
I would think so, but it has to be we are trying to get a digital app done from our friends in Bangalore, Nandan Nilekani and company. Hopefully we'll get that. But that will only facilitate to a point. I think what you do with the data, as my colleague Rukmini Banerjee says, there's only one thing that defies gravity, and that's data. It's collected and it goes up, it never comes down. How are people going to know what this information means and what am I supposed to do with it? So otherwise economists will sit and give talks in different conferences, and planning commission will become Niti Aayog, and that's the end of it. But what are people supposed to do? That's why we put out figures like 50% children can't read. That is something any ordinary person can figure out.
Sure. Now I come to your advice to people stage. What is your advice for the young in India? It's a very, very loaded, and I know that you will say first that I don't have any advice, but having seen...
It's a very dangerous territory.
Dangerous?
When I was young, I didn't want anybody's advice. So why would young people want my advice?
Okay. What are the 2-3 things that they should keep in mind? Let's put it like that.
I get fascinated watching young people and what they're up to these days.
So what have you learned from them? Let me turn it around.
Yeah, that's a big one. That'll require another one. I think they are completely free of a lot of burdens that our generation came with. Whether it was isms, whether it was taboos. Look what is going on. I mean, this is really fascinating that on the one hand there's extremely radical conservatism on one side growing, and on the other hand you see liberal to the point of, what is the word for it? free for all going on. And that fascinates me that at the same time, the same generation, people are going to these extremes. How aware people are of themselves and how easily they can express themselves. They may not be right always. And that's the beauty of it. That I don't think everybody is concerned about being right. A person like me spent the better part of my life trying to be right. I still am, I think. I don't think they're really worried about that. Which is sometimes comes out really brash. Maybe hopefully they'll grow up. And you would like them to.
How can you harness this open-mindedness? Because it is the best possible way of getting innovation, of questioning all the stated mindsets, like the education piece that we spoke about. I mean, do you have great hopes with this?
Well, if you don't have hope, you have nothing. But I think it's about goals. At some point, right now, everybody's in this euphoria of data, cell phones, talking all the time, and whatever gadgets. But at some point, you're faced with big realities, and not only individually, as socially as well. I think when the society is faced with big realities, young people have to think, and the older generation is no use. Some help and some guidance the older generation can perhaps give, but this generation has to have bigger social goals to look at. And I think many people are looking at individually. But it's not coming together as a social effort. I mean, individually want to change something. So for example, when I joined literacy movement, I became a part of something larger and I started playing my role. When we started Pratham, more people joined into the Pratham organization as something big that they could contribute to. But more and more people are also saying, I want to do this individually because I can create this app and then 100 million people will download it and then I'll have solved a problem or I would have made a lot of money. Maybe yes, maybe no.
Well, the government is trying that, and I think it's using the prism of jobs to talk about digital India, make in India, urban India, smart cities. Do you think that's the whole idea of creating a mass kind of move, or do you think it's simplistic?
No. There are people in the government, leading the government, people of political ideology who are trying to present something to the younger generation. This is without a doubt. The question is whether it will align. Some people are certainly excited and others are not. So how that alignment is going to happen, it worries me that when the government says we are going to train 400 million people in the next 7 years for jobs, A, you are saying 400 million jobs will be created of that kind. B, you are saying you have the money to make that and you have the human power to create in 7 years to train all these people. Well, if you create aspirations and don't ensure that they will be met, then you're creating a big problem. It already is there. And so what comes out of that, disillusionment, is already there. It's a question of where it will take people and whether there'll be people who will come out of that and start asking questions and answering questions. Right now, we are not asking the difficult questions. We're going for the easier answers. That's what I think.
And we'll come back to bite us.
Yeah, but that always happens to societies. Nothing new about it.
My next question is, who has inspired you through your journey? Where have you taken your source of inspiration from? In terms of your leadership style, in terms of, when you're looking at social change and what you're trying to achieve, who are the 2-3 people that...
No, my father definitely had a huge influence on me, although he was not at home most of the time. He never knew which school I was in. I mean, he knew which school I was in, but what standard I was in and all that. I watched him from afar. His colleagues, many people, I've seen them work. The huge amount of integrity, none of that me about them, the desire to solve problems and to look for real solutions. So all that has influenced me very much from very early days. I grew up until the age of 24 within this environment where
and he,
people
of course,
are being rational
had a party,
also.
a national party, Lal Nishan, which is a communist party. Yeah.
I mean, they more than a political party, they were more of a trade union movement. But they definitely had their own political thoughts. So, whatever people may think, they were not that kind of radical, disinterested in life in general. Not that kind of people. They are good people. They were. Many of them are gone. Only my father's left. I learned a lot from my mother. She was a very creative teacher and loved children. I was always a little aloof from her, but I learned a lot from her. And later on in life, one of the first things that I learned from one of my advisor in chemistry, it struck me that he trusted me so much with so many things. And that became a style later on. And then I saw that experience repeated. And basically, somebody tells you, go ahead, I'll support you, don't worry, go ahead and do it. I'll back you up. Now that my professor, Darrell Bush, did that to me when I was doing chemistry. I can't explain everything that happened, but I mean, it was quite simple. He said, okay, I trust you to go ahead and do it. The same thing happened when I met Bordia. Mr. Bordia, although I fought with him afterwards and many times and all that, but the fundamental value of Mr. Bordia was and many people will tell you this, he said, just go ahead and start and I'll support you. And people went on and got started. He was not there to tell you exactly what to do. Same thing with Mr. Vogel. I had the fortune of working with Dr. Gowarikar, who was the other ISRO scientist credited with creating our rocket fuel and all that. Later on, advisor to Prime Minister in science and technology. He was exactly like that. So the common theme seems to be in many of these people of the older generation is that they saw somebody and they supported and said, go ahead, I'll support you. And that was much bigger help than anything else. They were willing to listen. I've had arguments with many of these people, not with Mr. Vogel. You can't argue with him. So that sort of, and then some people call it mentorship. I don't know what the heck that is. But you got to learn. You got to be a learner. Nobody can teach you. And if you're with people from whom you can learn, then that is a big plus. I think young people should look at what they can gather from someone. Beware of anybody who's trying to teach you.
That's a wonderful thought. Last question. What is your message for upgrad? I mean, the concept of upgrad, which is really continuous learning, which is saying that you never know enough. You constantly have to reskill. Enjoy the process of learning and open your mind.
Yeah, I don't know too much about upgrad, but the idea seems to be the right one because most people have to upskill themselves and not only to get better in their career. I think this is something that's going to happen. Television is getting boring. Movies, maybe they excite you every now and then. You're sitting at home, sitting at the internet. What are you doing? I mean, hopefully people are going to go jogging and, health and all that. But this thing that I want to do something better and get better at something, hopefully will be there. And it's not only about, geek kind of things. Maybe it's about music. I have a friend, we didn't know, he used to play the guitar when we were in college. And recently I found he's become a master musician and a composer and all that. I said, where did you get this from? We used to go about singing and all that, but this guy's come out to be a master. Hats off to him for learning completely a whole new set of skills. And that's what really life is all about, that you renew yourself and get on, start doing new things. Find out something about yourself that you did not know. So the upgrad seems to be one narrow stream of this from a career point of view. But the basic principle is that people will want to know. You saw the story about this, our young little boy, 10-year-old junior golf champion. He learned most of his golf on YouTube. Now that is striking. And there are a lot of people who are doing that without anybody giving them a formal course. And that is where my hope is. That there will be a whole generation of people. This is like going way back into the 16th century when there were there were lords who were being scientists and experimentalists, but there were also the urchins helping them who became scientists working with them. And this is happening completely unknown to us, unseen by us, who are the establishment and the big daddies of education. Dr. Chavan, you're radicalizing education. That's all baloney. There are people who are doing this in a big way and we won't see it. And that's great because one day they'll come up and say, haha, you didn't know this.
I was going to say that we'll see them soon enough. Thank you so much, Mr. Chavan.
Thank you.